Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and this is a little different kind of conversation. One of my guests, Dr. Jen, had challenged me to begin to bring to you some of the messages I get when I drop into consciousness. So you may have the same experience that you feel this new information, these downloads, these ideas coming in, these awarenesses coming in, and they really inform your life and help you to make better decisions and move in different directions and have an expanded perception and awareness of what life can be. And I think we all get these whether or not we pay attention to them. And we are better or worse, depending on who we are and the messages that we get, at implementing them in our own lives. And oftentimes we sort of dismiss them as either just for us or, not something that they are available to share with other people. But I think more and more as we are each opening up to our own unique understanding and awareness of what is and of what we can create individually and as a collective, a human collective, especially in this very interesting time where we have an entire global reorganization, everything from all the responses to COVID to what I imagine will be ongoing financial restructuring, social restructuring, family restructuring, restructuring work and education, and all kinds of issues that we can bring lots of new awareness and information to if we begin to pay attention to the energies and ideas and awareness and expansion rising within us, using those to help us expand our own personal lives, and also then sharing them as feels appropriate for you in your life and with your community, with your families, with your friends, in order to inform one another of what's possible. I think that none of us have all of what is possible available to us, but together we each have small pieces of this that we can bring forward to really move forward personally and collectively into an entirely new way of living. Not one that is top down, that takes ideas of authority and structures those in terms of governments and laws and things like that for everybody to conform to, but more that begins to awaken our inner authority, our inner ability to create life as we choose to live it in a place of, individual empowerment and non-harming to others. So one thing that really could shift and bring us much, much further toward this way of living that's possible for us is beginning to take a second look at this idea of self-awareness. So we as humans are self-aware. We're not the only species that are self-aware, but we are self-aware in a particular way because we have a large conceptual brain and we have a thinking mind, and we tend to use our thinking mind to refer back to our conceptual brain. So in the scales of self-awareness, at that place where there's an awareness that you are, but you operate from those levels of ingrained drives, through instinct, through living out the ideas that you have of yourself and what you believe is true, on that scale of competency, there's a 4-part competency scale. That's what's called unconscious incompetence, which there's no evaluating yourself as to how and what you are doing. You are simply living your life in a unquestioned way through your impulses, through your ideas, through your perception of self and how you believe the world should be, through your emotions and acting on them. You are really instinctively moving through the world and operating that way. At the second level of self-awareness, or the second level of competency, as is related to awareness, we have what's called conscious incompetence. So this is the beginning of self-awareness, where you begin to realize that, maybe that argument I had with this person was not my best self, is not the person I would like to bring forward in that moment. And how can I look at that and begin to understand what I brought in that moment and how I might operate in that moment differently at another time? So at this level of conscious incompetence, we have an awareness that we can reflect on what we believe, what we think, what we value, who we are, our ideas about life and ourself, and begin to look at those things that work for us and those things that do not work for us, and begin to examine ourselves as the self looking back at the self. And usually at this level, this happens after the fact. So we follow those impulses. Maybe there's an argument with somebody and you follow the impulse of anger, you follow the impulse of perhaps revenge, or putting them in their place, or, telling them the truth about what you believe about something, whatever it happens to be. And later on you begin to say, that was a real feeling that came over me. I acted on that feeling. And now that that feeling has passed, I see the experience in a different way, and I think I can move into that experience a little more mindfully when it comes up again. Second level. Third level is conscious competence. Now this is the level where we begin to tap into the idea of the observer. So for people who have meditated, for people who have taken some mindfulness training, there is this really wonderful idea of an observer where you can begin to identify with the observer, with that quieter part of yourself, and observe yourself in action. So from this quieter part of yourself, you are observing your thoughts, observing your feelings, observing your emotions, observing your behavior, observing your reactions to things. And it is much more peaceful than being in the motion of your thoughts, your feelings, your ideas, your reactions, and all of those things. So it is one step more peaceful and more equimonious, is that a word? I'm not sure. To be in that place of observing and being able to see yourself in action. So as you notice perhaps that same person comes into your life armed with the same ideas, and they want to argue with you because that's the nature of your relationship, that you see them, that you might notice and feel some emotion rising in you, and you might choose, I'm just going to experience that feeling for a moment. You allow that feeling to rise and fall. And when that person begins to engage in you, you can do from a place of choice, operate in a different way. And instead of becoming more angry and yelling back at them, perhaps you just either let them vent, or, do you imagine you have a phone call and you walk away, or in some other way you change the dynamic of that automatic response of moving into anger and engaging in that argument. But you're able to watch yourself in action and make choices that are not that action in motion. So you are able to be the observer looking at the self, which is a little bit different than the self after the fact, looking back at the self from a place of greater awareness. So that's level 3. At level 4, there is an idea of unconscious competence, where you are, instead of observing yourself in action and making those little bit by bit shifts so that you are no longer operating from that place of action, you are in that state of operating differently from a place of doing that naturally without having to observe yourself and make those little changes, or without having to look back at yourself after the fact and analyze who you were in that moment. And so when we are in those places 2 and 3, basically, rather than that number 4, or number 1, but when we are in those places 2 And 3, we are in this place where we're making ourself and our conception, our concept of self real. And we are looking at our concept of self, our ideas of self, our experience of self as our reality, and we're continuously looking at that from a place of making it real and responding and reacting to that. So at level 2, you are making that behavior real, and you're looking back from that place of greater awareness, looking at the behavior, trying to change that experience of you in the moment. So from that level 3 of conscious competence, you are making the observer real, generally, and you are making the behavior or the ideas or the emotions as something that is happening that is not necessarily real, but you are identifying with the observer, having an experience of that constructed you, for lack of a better term, out in the world, and are making those changes bit by bit. But there's still that self-reflection, that self-awareness, where all of the awareness that you are operating from is on the self. So the problem with doing this from the perspective of where we are now, in space, time, and reality, in this place of kind of chaotic upheaval in our entire world, is that when we look at the self as real, and we are relating to the self as real, and we're always looking at our own self-reflection as something that's real, that we're kind of trying to make better, we do the same thing with the world. We have these ideas of the world that we think are real, and we begin to we relate to those ideas as real and making them real, and then trying to adapt what's happening now to those ideas that are already in place. So our ideas of justice, our ideas of money, our ideas of equality, our ideas of power, our ideas of who should be in power, and our ideas of victimization, and our ideas of all kinds of things that have been made real in our conceptual self, our conceptual mind. And in this time, when we look at those as real, we just change the stories around those realities. We do not actually change the reality itself. And it's the same thing when we are operating in those levels at the sense of self, that our sense of self is real, and we're just tinkering with that sense of self. But the looking at the self as real is our reality. Level 4 that we can come to, that I really truly believe and have been experiencing, and a lot of people have been experiencing this as well, all of my guests on Conversations from the Edge, and a whole lot of other people that you may or may not be in conversation with yourself. Like, this might be a new thing for you. This might be something that, you talk with your friends about, when you go out on Friday nights, whichever. But there is this emerging reality, this emerging experience of unconscious competence. In this unconscious competence, we are actually in experience, making awareness our touchstone in that experience rather than our sense of self or our sense of the world. So this sense of self, this sense of the world, is actually like a sixth sense, but not a sixth sense in this intuitive way that we often mean it. This sixth sense acts like our five senses. So we've got our five physical senses of taste, touch, sound, sight, and smell. And those help to orient us in the physical world, in the world that we make real through our physical conception of the world and through our ideas of the world, their kind of conceptual structures of the world. But we also have this sixth sense, this sense of self, that also acts like a sense in this version of reality, this idea of reality, this plane that we live in, so to speak, where we are always trying to find ourself in space, time, dimension, and reality based on our ideas about who we are, and reflecting back to our sense of self, our ideas of who we are, our ideas of the world, and how everything is working together. And we're kind of in this constant relationship between what we're perceiving in the moment and our ideas about what that moment is, and all the meanings that we bring to that moment, including the meanings of what should be happening, what we think should be happening, what actually is happening, and the wrongness between those two. So it becomes like this kind of relational playground, so to speak, where we are always relating to this place of ideas, and it's never quite from the moment, because you're either the observer observing the moment, which means you're out of what's happening as this place of equanimity, or you are in the fray of that, and you are in the moment of ideas expressing themselves and finding the rightness and wrongness of that. And, in that place of bringing your ideas and beliefs from the past to what is happening in the moment. But in this level 4, this place of unconscious competence, we drop, actually, we don't begin to, we move from that place where we're operating in this realm of relationship back and forth, and we drop into, from that place of being aware of the self and relating to the self and our ideas about the world, we drop into this place of being awareness and of being experience in motion without reflecting on that experience as we move along. We are simply in that experience. And it's different than level 1, where we are in that experience, but we are experiencing that from our ingrained, innate, constructed sense of self, and our innate, ingrained, constructed sense of the world, and all of our automatic emotions and thoughts and that kind of thing, where we're operating from that sense of self. We're just not aware of that sense of self as a sense and as a driver of our experience. At level 4, you've moved through having this sense of self. You've actually let go of relating to yourself as self, and you drop into awareness. And you're relating in awareness. You're not even relating. You're in awareness as experience, operating in unison, without looking at that as you go. So it's a whole different way of being, and it does require some movement from this place of self and being aware of self and referencing all of the things that we believe about ourselves as true, to dropping that sense and replacing it with our sense of awareness. So there is also kind of a fear deep down that if we let go of this sense of self, of relating to ourself as the ideas we have about ourself, and relating to the world as the ideas we have about the world, and always measuring ourself and the world in relationship with all of these ideas, that if we let go of that, we not die physically, but that we cease to exist from a probably ego standpoint. So, and not wanting to make the ego wrong, in my view, the ego is really what helps us to operate in time. It holds the idea of past and future and present, and all of the ideas that we have about those. But it really, once you strip down all of the rightness and wrongness of the ideas, and you allow yourself to be in the experience, then, ego simply is that part of you that helps to construct your experience of time and of being in time, of having a past, of having a future, of being in the present moment of now. And so I'm trying to step away from any wrongness about this. This is not about collapsing the ego or banishing it or making it wrong or anything like that. But your ego, when you begin to move to this other place, has a different function. You're still operating in time and space and interaction with other beings and this reality that is still an illusion, but it is the reality that we live in within the arising of this illusion. And as we are in that space of allowing the ego, instead of relating the self as its way of orienting in the world and finding its place in time, space, and reality, if we begin to let go of that requirement and allow it to simply be, and to be in the place of awareness, having the experience of your four-dimensional, I guess, reality of space, 3 dimensions of space and time, that can actually be your avenue and your experience of being in awareness, of flowing through experience as awareness, without having to relate back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with the self and the ideas of the world and the ideas of where you are and what's right and wrong and how you're doing and how you're measuring yourself in time and in your life. Because right now, in this very interesting time that we have, all of our ideas about what we are supposed to do, about what is supposed to happen, about what is, are beginning to collapse. From those places of self-awareness and relating to ideas, when you're in a time of collapse like this, it can become very, very frightening. Because the ideas that we make real, all of a sudden, are revealed to be something other than real. They are simply ideas that dissolve away. And so your experience of this may be trying to recreate, reconstruct, change the ideas that you have into something else that is real, and relating to those, thinking that that's a better way to live, or a way that you can begin to create your life in a different way. And that is actually, it's true. Our guest, Elohim, talks about that as better personality, as improving the conditions of the self and the world in a way that is more friendly to awareness. But as we move from this idea of relating through the self as the self, relating to the self and the world, and you begin to let go of the need of having fixed realities, fixed ideas to relate to. And you can begin to experience yourself as awareness in experience. As awareness having and being fully immersed in experience as one. Where you are moving through life, not from the instinct of the constructed self, but from the deeper reality of awareness. The catch here, and the difficult part of this, is that the mind, not so much the ego particularly, but the mind and our habits and our thoughts want to continue to experience this through ideas. It wants to have ideas of ideas so that it knows what to expect and how to be in this space. But from this place of awareness, there are no ideas to relate to. There is no concept of self to reflect back on. There is no idea of the world in the fixed reality that we have when we're operating from this sense of self. There really is the mystery of you and the mystery of the present moment unfolding in experience in the now. And because we have no ideas about what this is, we can't relate to it as an idea, we can't relate to it as an experience, we simply move toward that and are in experience. It can feel quite scary to move into this space from the perspective of the constructed self. However, you may already be getting glimpses of this as some of the ideas that you are used to experiencing begin to dissolve. So some of those ideas may be having a job. It may be health. It may be ideas about how life is supposed to work. It may come sometimes for some people as a sense of overwhelm. And you get in this sense of overwhelm and all of a sudden everything dissolves because you can't hold on to all of those things at one time, and all of a sudden nothing is, and you simply are. And you simply are having an experience. And the temptation in this space is to begin to reconstruct an experience, to go back into thought, to begin to say, okay, so I know from my processes that now I need to choose a better feeling emotion so that I can feel better in the reality that I'm in and make that reality real again. And relate to it as reality. But when you find yourself in those moments where you drop into that space where nothing seems real, stay there as best you can. Allow yourself to dwell in that space and spaciousness where nothing that you perceive as our experience of reality has any meaning. And where you begin to perceive the only reality as that experience of you in the moment, without reflection. And as you allow yourself more and more moments like this, you will find that reality, as you've projected it outward and made real, begins to dissolve as something that has any authority over you at all. And your reality begins to shift as you being in experience as awareness in the unfolding mystery of the present moment. You shift from being part of the self, looking back on the self to find meaning, to find value, to find safety in the moment, to find where you belong in this world, to being the mystery that is awareness, unfolding in the moment, and letting that be your reality. The natural inclination here is to say, well, how do I do this? I need to know how. I want to know the steps. I want to know all of those things so that I can do this. And that is level 2 and 3 in these levels. Because we cannot know how. We cannot make it happen. We cannot do it. We don't even script what happens or have a trying of what happens from that space. It is really simply surrendering in the moment to the experience and letting that experience unfold and guide you, not from something outside of you that tells your concept of you what to do, which is very tempting, but something that guides you from that moment, moving through the moment without reflection on what that moment is. So it is letting awareness create reality, rather than looking at the constructions in the mind and the self for an experience of reality to relate to. And this is not something that we jump into like all at once. This is something to notice those little moments when you are present in experience, free from comparison, free from ideas, free from looking outside of yourself as reality. So this might come in meditation, this might come at, times where you slip out of that comparison of self-awareness and looking to the self for reality and the ideas that the self has for reality. So when you slip out of those moments and simply exist in awareness, in experience, in the moment, and it may come when you're sitting quietly, it may come when you are driving, it may come when you're walking. That's walking in nature is a great time to soften your perceptions and allow this new experience to become your reality. So noticing those moments without analyzing how you got there. Although perhaps if walking in nature brings you these moments, you spend more time walking in nature, not looking for those moments, not trying to recreate those moments, but simply walking in nature, being in that soft presence and allowing those to unfold for you, because it's an easier place to have the experience. And without trying, because that always takes you out of an experience, without trying to stay in the experience, just stay in that soft spaciousness. without analyzing it, without looking at it, without comparing the rest of your reality to it, because then all of a sudden you're back at level 3. But just allow yourself to be. And as best you can, simply operate in this moment as awareness. So I had, back in May of 2019, I fell down, hit my head, had a significant concussion. People always pause there and say, oh my gosh, that was horrible. So I want you to let that go. It was a wonderful experience. It changed my life in a very positive way. One of the things that allowed me to do is because my brain had damage and was repairing itself, I could not think in the sense of putting thoughts together as, how do I do this? How do I make this happen? How do I focus on this? I could not focus. I mean, my eyes could see, but I could not focus my brain on activities, on ideas, on words, on thoughts, on constructions, on realities, on anything. Anytime I began to think and reflect back to myself and my ideas and my thought constructions and all of the constructions that made up my sense of self and my sense of the world and the reality of the world, I had no access to. I could not think them. I could not refer to them. I could not actually conceptualize using them. I could really only operate in awareness. Because anytime I moved into self-awareness, awareness of the constructed self in the brain and the body, my head hurt. So it was an immediate reflection on when I was operating from self-awareness, levels 2 or 3, and when I was operating from awareness. And it was amazing how much I could do in this state of non-reflected awareness that didn't require thought, that I habitually brought thought to. So things like cooking dinner. Like, I didn't even really think about what I was cooking. I would go to the refrigerator. There would be things that kind of looked more inviting than other things. I would take them out, and as I was opening a package, it would occur to me, not thoughts would come, but sort of direction, guidance, this inspiration would come about what to do with that and how to cook it to make a meal without really thinking about what the end meal would be. It was the same thing with pretty much everything else I did. When I got up in the morning, instead of thinking about what am I going to wear, all the habits of thought and the habits of reflecting back on thought, reflecting back on the constructed self for information about how to operate in that moment were unavailable to me. I could only simply get up, go to my closet, pull something off the shelf, put it on, and go through those kinds of motions, not from a place of that constant self-reflection, thought awareness, but simply from being, not even of observing myself. There was no observer there. There simply was me as awareness in motion. Now, there are some things that were harder to do with that. Some things actually do, at least in this moment for me right now, work a little bit better when I bring some reflection to it. So if I'm writing a book and I'm doing some editing, doing the editing from that reflection can be helpful, and I'm not the right words, I am allowing more experiences of editing and doing other things that I normally habitually always come from the constructed self, to do those from awareness, to allow myself that experience. And so from these small moments of being awareness in experience, begin to do your life. Be in action, be in motion, be in experience, not just sitting in a meditation chair or doing something where there is no activity involved, but bringing activity into your experience as awareness in experience. And it's hard to explain because any ideas we have about it then drop out of the realm of awareness and experience and back into that place of reflection and measurement. So it is simply experience being had in that moment as awareness. At the times when I am in this place of awareness in experience, life feels to me like this extraordinary adventure being had, not as a reflection on what does adventure feel like, but the feeling within me, the experience that I have of this experience is one of lightness, of joy, of fun, of adventure, even when those experiences that I'm having are very mundane, or perhaps even what I would consider unpleasant from another point of view, an experience of self-awareness. And so I invite you, if this is new for you, or if you like to have some form of an idea to help lead you in this way, to consider this experience of being awareness and experience as simply an adventure of being and of trusting in that adventure and enjoying the adventure unfolding. Thank you for listening. You can find this conversation with consciousness and all conversations with consciousness as I release them under the Conversations with Consciousness section on the conversationsfromtheedge.net page. Thank you, and enjoy the adventure. This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.